You were called mature, responsible, wise beyond your years, and part of you felt proud, but another part felt tired. You learned early that being easy to handle made life smoother, that staying quiet kept the peace, that needing less meant being loved more. And without realizing it, you stopped being a child. This is what psychology reveals about children who grow up too fast. People said you were mature, wise beyond your years, different, but maturity is supposed to come from growth, not from pressure. And here's the uncomfortable idea. When a child grows up too fast, it's rarely a sign of talent. It's usually a sign of adaptation. Somewhere along the way, your nervous system realized that depending fully on others wasn't safe enough. So it reorganized you. Psychology calls this parentification, when a child takes on emotional or practical responsibilities that belong to adults. It calls it insecure attachment, when safety feels inconsistent and the child becomes hyper-aware of shifts in mood and tone. But those words sound clinical. What it actually feels like is this. You become the emotional temperature reader of the room. You notice sighs, silences, micro-expressions. You predict arguments before they happen. You shrink your needs because they feel secondary. Children are not supposed to manage adult emotions, yet many do. When a caregiver is overwhelmed, depressed, addicted, volatile, or simply emotionally unavailable, the child unconsciously compensates. Not because they choose to, because their survival depends on connection. And if connection requires being useful, calm, mature, then maturity becomes currency. There's also cognitive dissonance at play. A child cannot accept the idea that the adults are unstable. That would feel terrifying. So the mind creates a softer narrative. I just need to behave better. I just need to be less emotional. I just need to help more. This illusion restores a sense of control. Control feels safer than helplessness. Over time, responsibility fuses with identity. You don't just act mature, you become the mature one. Teachers trust you, relatives rely on you, friends confide in you, and the reward system reinforces it. Approval releases dopamine. Being needed releases validation. But here's the paradox. The same adaptation that earns praise slowly disconnects you from spontaneity. Play feels awkward, neediness feels shameful, rest feels undeserved. Research on chronic childhood stress shows that prolonged exposure to unpredictability sensitizes the amygdala, the brain's threat detection system. So even in calm moments, your body stays slightly alert. You call it being responsible. Your nervous system calls it staying ready. Hyper-independence begins to form. You stop asking for help even when it's available. You anticipate disappointment before it happens. You handle things alone because alone feels predictable, and predictability feels like safety. But inside, something subtle happens. You start measuring your worth by how little trouble you cause, by how much you can endure, by how stable you appear. Emotions become strategic. Tears are postponed. Anger is swallowed. Fear is intellectualized, and no one notices. Because from the outside, you look strong, reliable, unshakable. The world rewards children who grow up too fast, but it rarely asks what they had to give up in exchange. And what they often give up is the experience of being protected, the experience of being held without having to hold everything together, the experience of simply being a child. And when that phase is skipped, it doesn't disappear. It waits, quietly, inside the adult you're still becoming. And when that child becomes an adult, the adaptation doesn't just vanish, it evolves. You become efficient, capable, strangely calm in crises. People admire how grounded you are when things fall apart. But what they don't see is that chaos feels familiar to you. So when life becomes unstable, you don't panic. You activate, you handle, you fix. And sometimes you even feel more alive in dysfunction than in peace. Calm, on the other hand, can feel unsettling. Silence can feel like the moment before something breaks. Research on trauma adaptation shows that chronic childhood stress can wire the body into a persistent fight-or-flight readiness. Not dramatic, just subtle. A slightly elevated baseline of alertness. You scan rooms automatically. You anticipate tone shifts. You prepare responses before questions are finished. And because you've done this for years, it feels like personality. But it's conditioning. There's also the loneliness of competence. When you are always the strong one, people stop checking if you're okay. They assume resilience means invulnerability, so you become the emotional container for others. The friend who absorbs, the partner who stabilizes, the sibling who mediates. And at some point, maybe late at night, there's this quiet resentment. Not because you don't love them, but because you wonder what it would feel like to collapse without consequences. Attachment theory suggests that children who had to self-regulate too early often struggle with safe dependency later. You crave closeness deeply, yet when someone offers real support, something inside hesitates. Accepting help feels foreign, almost wrong, as if needing is regression, as if softness equals danger. So you oscillate. You want intimacy, but you maintain control. You want to be seen, but not too deeply, because being seen once meant being responsible, and responsibility once meant survival. Another hidden consequence is emotional compression. You don't explode, you compress. Feelings get translated into productivity. Sadness becomes overworking. Anxiety becomes planning. Anger becomes sarcasm or quiet withdrawal. You function exceptionally, until one day the body intervenes. Burnout, chronic fatigue, random tears you can't explain, because suppressed emotion doesn't disappear. It waits for capacity. And here's something rarely acknowledged. Growing up too fast also creates remarkable strengths. You developed pattern recognition early. You can sense shifts in energy before words are spoken. You know how to stay steady in storms. You learned empathy not from theory, but from necessity. That depth is real. That resilience is real. The twist is this. The problem was never your strength. It was the belief that strength required self-erasure. Neuroscience shows that the brain remains plastic throughout adulthood, which means the identity built for survival can evolve into one built for choice. You can learn safe dependency. You can practice receiving. You can let someone sit with your discomfort without rushing to fix theirs. It feels awkward at first, almost embarrassing. Like speaking a language you understand but never practiced. Out loud, but slowly, the nervous system recalibrates. Safety stops feeling suspicious, and something unexpected happens. When you stop carrying everyone else automatically, you discover parts of yourself that were never fully explored. Even anger that has clarity instead of guilt. Healing for someone who grew up too fast is not about becoming fragile. It's about allowing the inner child not to take control, but to finally be acknowledged. To say, that was heavy. To admit, I was scared. To recognize that maturity forced by circumstance is different from maturity chosen through growth. You were adaptive, you were strong, but you were also a child. And children deserve protection, not performance. Maybe you can't rewrite the beginning, but you can renegotiate the pattern. You can notice when you overfunction. You can pause before automatically saying, I've got it. You can experiment with saying, can you help me? Not because you're incapable, but because you're allowed to be supported. There is a quiet power in that shift, a different kind of strength, one that doesn't require vigilance. Growing up too fast shaped you. It gave you depth. It gave you awareness. It gave you survival intelligence. Now the question isn't how to undo it. The question is how to expand beyond it, to become not just the strong one, but the whole one. And if you recognized yourself in these words, maybe today you can do something small but radical. Let someone see a crack, admit a need, rest without earning it. Because sometimes the bravest evolution isn't becoming stronger. It's becoming softer without feeling unsafe. And that might be the kind of maturity you were always meant to grow into.